This is part 2 of my interview with Lindsay Barnett from Playground Productions and James Deighan from MegaCat Studios. Lindsay and James's companies are working together to revive the backyard sports games with 6 re-released games from between 1997 and 2002 and an original modern take on backyard baseball as well. We got into a lot of the specific details about the games themselves in the last episode, so for this episode, we'll be getting into some tangents about getting involved in the MAGFEST, short for Music and Gaming Festival, Lindsay's research project for her master's degree in education, how the prospect of being watched affects the books we might read and the games we might play, and what dream projects might be in the future for both of my guests. James's answer to this question is, quite frankly, an amazing game pitch, and I hope he gets to make it someday. Okay, let's get to part 2. Make games. Drink coffee. Speaking of passion, there's a whole section on the MegaCat website about game preservation. You're involved with MAGFEST. You guys are working with a company to make actual game cartridges. How do you balance all of this sort of community involvement stuff? I don't know if you'd call it, sort of extracurricular activities with the business obligations that you have of running a studio. How do you find time for all of this?
Yeah, that's that's a tricky one. I feel like some of these things, I use MAGFest as an example. I think we're one of the only departmental volunteers that have done it for a decade. And if you're not familiar with what MAGFest is, it's like there's an indie video game showcase, and a lot of the more prestigious showcases cost a lot of money to get into. And MAGFest has a policy where if the game is great and the judges curate the game, there's no cost to the indies. And there's a huge community in the MAGFest team, really intended to just kind of protect the MAGFest pillars. And I think that the folks who've been there the longest probably almost care the most too, because they watch it grow from like a chiptune showcase and music to this event that draws hundreds of thousands of people every so many years, and it completely 24-hour action. And that's where we met some of my core team members. It's where we met our creative director, Nate Flynn, and a lot of our team members that would come there. You see someone lug a 50-pound CRT, through a giant building to showcase their game. They're probably a candidate to work here because they have a real love for it. We have a few things that we put a lot of time into. One of them is Unity Pittsburgh. So we run the Unity user group here in our city, which it helps all the students and people that want to join the industry get access to the tools and the technology and just understand, hey, you can follow your dreams. You can do this. It's different on the East Coast, I think, a little bit. There's not a ton of game companies here in Pittsburgh. There's like 2 notable ones with MegaCat and Shell. And I think that's like part of our mission, let people know they can follow their dreams and you can do games as a career. And then, obviously we have things like the indie retro showcases that travel, which include MAGFest. And this goes back to the kind of the culture question. We think about the MegaCat mission, and we have this thing called the Principles of Cattiness on our website, on our wall, on our stuff. I think those things really resonate with the team because that's part of the reward of working at MegaCat. We get to also drive this mission that we all believe in, and we have to make sure that we're disciplined with how we're managing our time for it, because it's easy to get lost in the sauce. We're just, spending days and weeks and months, and every department has some sort of 80-20 rule, and we have these front room activity things. If those are on track, then all the other stuff, ends up being partially unlocked. And I've never had a case where the teams didn't want to compete on who's coming to PAX and who's doing the showcase and whatnot. So they're kind of part of our retention strategy too, also unintentionally. Like the team just loves doing team stuff together. I'm quite blessed that on any given day in my random channel on Slack, it's the team doing team stuff on the weekend outside of work because they just love working with each other. And it's just one of my favorite things actually about MegaCat is that there's so much shared values and shared interests. It's easy for them to get along in and outside of work. But I think for many of us, those first couple jobs in the games industry is really, really tricky to navigate and really hard to uphill climb and establish credibility and get into a role you're satisfied with. So all these little things we do with showcases and mentorship and lunch and learns and whatnot, they're easy for people to get behind because they have flashbacks of their first the first month, their first week, their first games company before they came to MegaCat.
It's so important to have that sense of community. And there's always a risk if you're working at a studio that doesn't sort of value the happiness of the team quite as much, because then you can get you can get really attached to your coworkers, but people start, spreading out as soon as they can get jobs elsewhere. And if you're in a place where people would just like be happy to stay there, then that all, it makes more sense.
There's a book called Choose Your Enemies Wisely. And it talks about, making great company culture and having shared dreams and shared wishes and shared, like, here's the mission, here's what we're about, here's what we're up against, and how do we find the right motivators, and how do we find ways. And one of the things that really resonated with me in that book, because I read a lot about just kind of how to make effective teams and how to make these things operate. And so much of that talks about how your best competitive advantage for retention is also creating these ceremonies and creating this place where people love it so much because of the intangibles, but they can't imagine going anywhere else. And that's one of the things that I think about a lot. And it's definitely part of how we've infused MegaCat with all these, we'll say, like, unique initiatives, because when I see things that are driving the principles of cattiness forward that are also like really exciting and compelling to the team, it's a natural like obligation for me to find a way to fit them in somewhere to the puzzle, as long as we're not, doing it in a way that just destroys any possibility of a P&L working. Because I think when you make the decision to work at a company like a MegaCat versus like an EA, there has to be a mission reason, because you're not doing it for like the paycheck. If you're choosing projects sometimes based on a love for the projects, not because it's the biggest ticket. And as you know, with game companies, you're either an ex-dev studio or you work on success and royalties. And there's sometimes projects where that's not even part of the equation for us. So we got to just get in it and believe in it and love it. So it's definitely part of how we function like this. Because I've been part of studios pre-MegaCat when I was making games where people aren't in it to win it. They clock out and they're done, and there's not a desire. They're working on projects that are not exciting, and they don't know how to find the fun. They don't want to find the fun. They just want to ship it. And that's not the dream. That's not why we were inspired to do this as adults and make games. Like, it's exactly in conflict with what 10-year-old James would want 40-year-old James to do. The industry is as wild as it is right now. I think every day about how much gratitude I have for the fact that we have clients that when they work with us, they never want to not work with us again. And we have so many clients like that we get to be choosy. And so I'm watching my colleagues every month still. Like, my when I was at PAX, I was really enjoying myself because I was watching fans just explode for Backyard. And we also were showcasing on the other side of the booth, the God of War Sons of Sparta booth, which the fans were going crazy for. And I thought, man, this is such a fun and fulfilling moment for the team, because there's nothing like watching players just like gush for your work. And as I'm there, I was just getting so many text messages from all the layoffs that happened at some of the first parties. And I was thinking, this is such a strange time, in the industry and at MegaCat. And I cannot wait for the contraction to stabilize from the AI and all the first parties and the third parties. It's like, I think about it every day. Sometimes it keeps me up because, to your point, like, we have to make sure we're planning and anticipating a few steps ahead. But I'm not sure if anyone really can right now. And we're just really lucky that we've had such a continued level of people showing up for our titles and the whole fan-driven fandom product design working. But it's always on my mind, though, that we shouldn't ever get comfortable, and we have to really really stay in it to win it.
This is like way left field, but Lindsay, I wanted to ask you about your master's project.
Yeah,
So to get your teaching degree, it's a master's degree, and you studied how digital readers impact early elementary students' reading and comprehension skills.
that's right.
And I saw recently that it was somebody giving a talk, I think, about I think it was a TED talk about the sort of change in educational attainment over time over the last decade or so. And they were drawing the conclusion basically that when screens had replaced a bunch of worksheets and books and stuff in classes, that it was a net negative, because we are just more tempted to skim on a screen than we are on a piece of paper. Is that what you found? Like, what did you learn when you were doing that study?
That is definitely one of the things that I had found, and interestingly, as it relates to backyard and gaming in general, there was a gamification of some of the like children's books that were in um, on e-readers, and the question that I had kind of developed after observing so many of these students that were like reading, and I say that with quotes because they were on the device and engaged in the material for a longer period of time, but they were not actually reading a lot of it. They were like playing with the you know, interactables on the page or clicking around to other things and basically everything that wasn't reading. Now, of course, there are examples where it really did help kids, especially if kids were learning English and being able to like have the words highlighted and move through. But I think overwhelmingly, it became like just because someone is on a device doesn't mean they're utilizing it for its intended result or gaining what you're hoping for. And oftentimes you'd look around the classroom and people would be reading and you have no idea what they're reading behind that screen. And so I thought that was definitely one of the things. The other thing on the flip side though that I found, which I think applies to podcasts and applies to gaming, is some of the kids who were at a lower reading level got to have a more accessible platform where they could read at a level that was appropriate for them without having the embarrassment of holding a book that's not the same range as their peers. And I thought that was a really interesting one of like there was a level of comfort because nobody knows what they're actually reading. And so if they were at a different level, they really could maximize the results. And in some ways, I think that you get to experience that with um, gaming, especially like with digital downloads. Like cozy games are so big right now. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. And maybe you're more likely to check out a certain game or try it out if you don't have to like go into the arcade and actually like play this specific game. And I think people are able to create fandoms and communities with something that they are passionate about and find those people. So there's a lot that project informed. And I also like very much looked at a lot of educational media companies that were doing things the right way and starting to take notes of that and kind of apply that to anything else that I've done.
That's really interesting. I had not considered the idea that the fact that you're on an e-reader and everyone has the same e-reader means that nobody can see what you're actually reading. And that's sort of like the free school lunch thing where
Yes.
if you're on the free school lunch program, if it's a program that some kids are on and some are not, then there's a
Right.
stigma associated and you can be embarrassed and maybe you don't pick up the food and you don't eat it because you don't want the other kids to know. But if everyone gets the free school lunch, then who cares, right? It's for
Right.
everyone.
Which is very different, especially with, in a classroom, books are often like ranked based on reading levels, which is essential for, people finding the right. But, there is quite the difference if you're a high reader or a lower reader, like to be able to have to go to that section. Um, and so for something like an e-reader to solve that problem was really interesting. And, I think that's the same thing with accessibility, right? Anybody can play backyard baseball and they play it at their own level, but nobody has to know what the settings are. It's your preference of how you want to play. And I think that sometimes when you think about things that were intended for educational but can be applied across just making life better for everyone. That was definitely something that my master's program taught me. It was like, doesn't need to be for kids. It doesn't need to be educational. It could just be the better way to do things. And certainly with our accessibility and our games, I think that's a good lesson to have learned.
It's really cool. I think, the idea of the spectatorship part of it affecting behavior, it's interesting, especially considering gaming. Like I
Hmm.
certainly have been in situations where, a friend did an arcade birthday party and everyone got $10 worth of credit. So you could play whatever game you wanted to, essentially for free. But would I play a game that I'd never played before, even though it was not my money, because I would maybe look stupid doing it in front of my friends, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Or would you be at that arcade party would you go and play Dance Dance Revolution if you didn't know how to dance well, or would that be too embarrassing? But would you play that alone because you wanted to see how fun it was? I think there's definitely an aspect of like doing it in front of other people, and something that's really cool about like games is you can build communities with people that really understand and have the same interest as you. And that becomes something even stronger. And I think backyard baseball is a great representation of that. Of there are a whole generation of people who grew up playing it and then went and played baseball in their own backyards, and like all understood with the same level of understanding because they played the same game to get there.
It's the old saying on the internet, no one knows you're a dog.
Bringing it back to the dogs.
Yeah. I was also just thinking about the time that I was playing Time Crisis 2 at an arcade, and I was playing one-handed, and I sort of hit a flow state, and then at the end of, the I think I lost or something, and I looked around and I realized there were like 5 people watching me. And I was like, "Oh, I'm that guy right now." Like I'm the one that everyone's like, "Oh my God, look at him go." And I felt kind of weird.
I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of that, and I think, it's about now just figuring out ways that we can celebrate what the games that we love and how we love them, and um, you know, again, doing it at the level that makes sense for you, because that's been really cool to see like kids play against their parents in like backyard derby or demo, and each of them play at like their own accessibility point, so it feels really equal. And it could be the first time in that kid's life that they ever have the chance to like beat their parents at a sport. And it happens, and it's really fun to watch.
Make Games Drink Coffee is brought to you by me, Aaron Nemoitin. I'd love to grow the audience for this podcast to the point that it can pay for itself in some way. To that end, it would really help if you left a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or like and comment if you're watching on YouTube. You show that algorithm who's boss. All right, back to the show. So this is a question for both of you. I'm sure you both have your different answers for it, but do you have the other dream IP to work with? And James, you kind of already answered this, but like, can you share what it is? Can either of you share what it is, or is it all kind of like it's in the works, it's legal stuff, we don't want to give it away?
Could not really share because like to me, backyard sports is so my dream. When I started Playground Productions, we had a whole slate of projects, and the minute backyard started to catch fire, we cleared the rest of the slate, because I'm like, first of all, everybody wants a project to catch fire, but what happens when you actually do? So the dream project for me is more like, I want this brand to expand out of just you know, we have backyard baseball coming. I can't wait for the next sport to come out. I can't wait to do more TV. We did an animated special. I want to do more animation. I want to do a feature film one day. Like, I have such big dreams for this franchise, and getting to create with these amazing characters, like that's so the dream. But it goes much farther beyond just this game.
So your answer is you've got your hands full.
I've got my hands full. And also,
Yeah.
like, I mentioned, or I'm not sure, but I think I might have mentioned like my love of the Peanuts. There's also like, I don't know if I want to, like some things like need to be left there. Like, I have certain memories with my grandparents and whatever with certain brands that I don't want to like be living in. I want to keep those as a fan. And backyard is one that like has just been such a joyous process that I'll stay in this fun world. I actually tell my friends, I have my personal Instagram account, and then I have access obviously to the Backyard Sports official Instagram. And I tell people, like, when there's too much going on in the world, I'll just go on the Backyard Instagram account, because it's much like more fun place to be on there. People are very positive. My For You page is like sports and games and like fun things and funny things. And I'm like, anytime I like living in this fun world.
There's this new this new term called Hopecore. You familiar with it?
No, but I feel like I live that.
So it's the idea that like it's sort of it's in response to the kind of postmodernism nihilism thing that something like Rick and Morty. I love Rick and Morty, but people have criticized it a bit for sort of feeling nihilistic, and there being a lot of media that's just sort of about itself, about breaking the fourth wall, about this sort of self-awareness and winking at the audience, like Deadpool, for example. And maybe people are getting tired of that. And Hopecore,
Can I break the fourth wall right now?
yeah, sure.
Well, if you like Rick and Morty, you should really watch the Backyard Sports animated special because it's done by the same studio, Lighthouse Animations, who did Rick and Morty. But Backyard Sports, the animated special, is a much more safe environment.
Yes. So I actually watched it last night with my son. And we both laughed many times. Yeah, I thought it was fun. It's so bright. We got a new
The same
TV.
animators as Rick and Morty, which is kind of crazy.
Well, and Rick and Morty, it's funny, like there's so many adult animated shows that feel really bland visually, and they're mostly like they're inspired by some combination of like Rick and Morty and Family Guy and stuff like that. But Rick and Morty looks better than all of them. So yeah, props to that team.
They're amazing.
People described Project Hail Mary as Hopecore because like it's just a really positive piece of media that's about like people solving problems and finding the best, and it's not cynical, and it's not trying to the message doesn't end with like, well, there's nothing we can do, right? It's all about finding the best and being positive, and that's something I think we could argue that we need right now. Yeah.
I think it's really important, and I think part of the fun of the storytelling with the backyard, whether it's the video game or the animated special, is I think that there's been like a little bit of an overcorrection of what kind of content people need. And there's something as simple of what would happen if your sports superstition like was not matched? What happens if your lucky gum, was missing? That right there is a sports story, but it's a true like everybody can understand that because adults have their own crazy superstitions, maybe even more so than the kids. And I just think that like sports are one of the best ways to teach people about life. And I think that there's a lot about resilience and winning and losing and all of that that sports can teach. And that's part of what I love. Even though backyard baseball is not an educational game, there are a lot of my students at least struggled with post COVID. They struggled with winning and losing because they hadn't had the experience of it before. And if you think about that, if you were quarantined in kindergarten and then didn't come back to school until second grade, like you missed a lot of that playground, recess, gym class stuff where like you were at home and you've only won and you're 7 years old. So I think there's things like that like baseball of all of the different sports is such a good representation of like you might get struck out, you get another at bat, and you got to get up there and you got to do it, and it's about how you show up and what you do the next time. And I just really think that people could learn more about that, and it might help them with their life.
I really like the exploration of that perspective of when you're a kid and things that are objectively low stakes feel like the most important thing in the world. And that's actually one of the reasons I love A Christmas Story, even though I'm Jewish and I didn't see it until I was like, 28 or something. But I love that perspective of kids have this idea that like everything is the most important thing ever. And even though adults are the ones that have to tell those stories to, make the cartoons and write it and stuff, I think it's important to get into kids' heads in that respect and tell that story from their level. And with the understanding and the empathy that like, yeah, I understand that this feels really important to you.
Right. And that's part of, I think, what makes Backyard so unique is like, it's how these kids are coming to the plate. Ronnie Dobbs is our head of marketing's favorite character. And I don't typically pick Ronnie for my team, but he always talks about Ronnie being his favorite because Ronnie hops up and he's so happy every time he gets to the plate. And then if he strikes out, he cries. But the next time he gets back up to the plate, he hops up again with a smile on his face. And like
Mm.
that is life. And that character represents what it's like to just be a kid and get back up there and try again. And I think, those are universal stories. You can just frame them in a way that a kid can understand, but a lot of the adults, I think, understand it in a very different way when they reflect back on our game and play it again. Like they have a very unique perspective. One of the most unique perspectives being like, people are often like, yeah, there's hardcore simulation games. I'm like, have you seen a T-ball game? If you've seen a T-ball game, this is probably the most realistic to T-ball that you've ever seen. There's a kid somersaulting and spinning around in the field and picking flowers. That will hit you differently as a parent or a teacher than it did as a kid. Anyways, James, what's the
James,
dream?
yeah, can you share any of your dream IPs, that you would love to work on personally or as a studio?
Yeah, I guess some interesting ones personally. I saw your Sonic shirt, Aaron. So I'd love to do like a Dr. Robotnik Factorio game
Oh,
where you're just like
wow.
you're setting up and kind of like starting in like Green Hill Zone 1 and creating the levels Sonic's playing through, and through like an expected kind of evil scientist moment, you're like reframing history to your advantage with, I had a strategic withdraw at the end of this level because we have to go to the next level, right? So that's been like a wish list thing for a minute. And then I think all the games we grew up with that we're still fans of now as adults, like your Zeldas and Borderlands, all the things are really interesting. But I'm like a sucker for arcade sports. Like I used to play 15 minutes of NBA Jam before bed in college, years after it came out. I love, like, I grew up in a sports city. I love playing sports. For me, it was like a huge part of my identity as a kid growing up. I'm not getting too much into details there. I'm like a foster care product, and any city and any house I go to, I could just play sports and make friends and find my way around. And it was like so much of my identity then, and even now, it's like it's such a genuine passion. And we think about like these arcade sports, they're so much more accessible than like the crazy finger karate of like the FIFAs and the current gen
Yes.
PGAs. It's like if you sit
Yes.
down to play a current generation like modern simulation sports game, there's like a pretty massive barrier to entry to just sit down and enjoy it. Our executive producer here, Danny, at one point was like world ranked 10 for like some of the NHL titles. He's crazy, crazy hockey fan and player. But it's so hard for the team members that even if they love hockey, if they've kind of lapsed in their reps for playing games that franchise, you can't like casually play. It's like brutal. So maybe a new take on NHL '94 will be a lot of fun. I thought about some of that stuff before, and we've talked to NHL, and they're pretty bullish on us. So it's just a matter of timing. And
Or we could just make backyard hockey and call
yep,
that a day.
and if I had been 2 inches taller, maybe a little longer limbs, I would have loved to play pro hockey. But I definitely have I love arcade sports. I'm a sucker for it since we started MegaCat, and we made a ton of internal sports games and game jams. We made this really funny one called Field of Nightmares. It kind of plays like pigskin football. Have you ever played that before, Aaron? It's like a Sega Genesis arcade game.
I
But
didn't play that one.
it's the most simple pick up and play football game, and you're just running left to right. There's like they reduce the rules like crazy to make them arcade snappy, so you can just go. And there's all these silly things that are just like kind of off the chain, where if you're down at halftime, you just get this really powerful troll in your team, and the audience chants troll, and you just have this really powerful running back. And it's like it's just so much pure fun. And my creative director is a little bit of a curmudgeon for these things, and you can get him so excited still playing these games because they're just purely fun, dude. And I always feel like there's a gap right now for these titles, and I think that's one of the things that makes it so exciting for fans when they sit down to play like Backyard Derby at PAX East, is that it has all the toggles. You can play a higher difficulty version, but it's accessible to like a casual player or a kid. And I'm just so happy to be able to work on a franchise we adore that can take some of these fan wish list things, into the product design early and make sure we're bringing something to market that anyone can get up and play.
That is cool. Yeah, my perspective on like racing games and sports games is like I will play it if it is not realistic. If it is realistic, I'm not interested.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. It's tricky because the more realistic it gets, there's a level of artistry in those simulation titles, and we've been able to do some XDev on a couple of them that are like really impressive, wild game engine, like technological masterpieces that are just these insane, functions. But that's just a different craft, and I think the stuff we like to build and we like to play.
I agree. We need more of that, like NBA Jam, NFL Blitz, the Rush series of racing games. I loved how you could just fly across a city and it made no sense, but ridiculous but fun. SSX, that's a
Yeah,
series that
love.
needs to come back. Somebody needs to make kart racing games besides Nintendo. One every like 7 years is not enough.
These are great ideas.
Check out Hyperyuki on Steam. Hyperyuki is like is an independent title that plays just like SSX Tricky. I just saw at a trade show. It looks awesome.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds good. This is getting to the kind of like LinkedIn inspiration slop territory, but what has I saw that you're really into strength training and used to do bodybuilding. I'm not sure if you still do, but is there something that game developers can learn from from strength training and bodybuilding?
Yeah, I'm pretty biased, okay? Like it's my number one like hobby my entire life, and I would say the only thing that has never faltered in my life has always been like fitness and games. That's always been the high points and the things that make me happiest. And I don't think there's anyone in the world that shouldn't live an active lifestyle in some capacity. You just have to find what is a little bit fun for you and a little bit satisfying to make it stick. And we used to have this workout program we started here during COVID called CatFit, and we were doing these like 15 to 30-minute blocks, and we'd have a ton of our team members who were locked in at home, like doing like guided calisthenics. And I have a physiology degree, which, as I was mentioning in my med school story, turned into a bio degree, and I went pre-med, and then I got into the MD PhD program at Pitt, and I dropped out after about 2 years, thinking like, I wonder if this is silly to say now, but it's like wonder if I can make games. And
What if?
and it's like, I remember, it's funny. My wife is the one that convinced me to drop out. She was like, you love games so much, and you just left this vacation and we went to like a video game bar because you can't stay away. Like, why do you care so much about, like, why can't you just exercise and do that later? Like, you don't have to do this as a profession. And but CatFit like reminded me that a lot of times people just need exposed to it. It's like a power of association thing, and it's a community team building thing, and a lot of the team members started it then, and that created a little bit of friendly social accountability. And we set up like a Slack bot, and we added like a couple little things of the Slack bot where it reminds people to drink water, and we give them points for being consistent. And it became like, I used to make this joke to some of my industry friends. The next trade show we did, which was one of the PAX East, it was like 2021 or 22, and we were there to show a boxing game we had just created, and WrestleQuest, which is a wrestling game. When we showed up, I was joking with our booth neighbors. I'm like, all of the MegaCat nerds are like 150 pounds of steel each because we've been doing planks and push-ups and sit-ups. You guys are sitting at home rotting, and just goofing with each other, because most of us had only seen each other at that point like 2 years ago because we were like locked in for COVID. The reality is a ton of my team members had like slimmed down, and they were like, posture was better, like scoliosis addressed, and a lot of it was just this really small catalytic moment of this team unifying. Can you do it for 15 minutes? Can we just hang out? And for a while there, we were leaving microphones on. Everyone's like exasperated, laughing and breathing hard. It was just really fun, and it just reminded me of my earlier years as a personal trainer, where a lot of times it's just like you need someone to give you a chance to do it in a way that you want to do it, so it's not being thrust upon you and forced, right? So Zumba, Billy Blank's tapes, whatever the thing is, you get dancing. You just find your thing. Like, don't. Sometimes I remember people would get so turned off by the concept of like weight training because it wasn't exciting or fun for them, but you just got to find the thing. Yeah.
That James has to be a bodybuilder because we at Playground are going to give him a very heavy lift with all the work that we're going to give him. So, he's got to be able to do it. But James and I bonded. We're both, sometimes we have very similar traits. Mine is not as much weightlifting as much as it is cardio. And the amount of meetings that James and I have had, especially at the start of working together, where like I was camera off on the elliptical and he was camera off lifting, and I was like, that's gonna work well for us. We took a meeting on was it next on ellipticals next to each other once?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's
right.
Funny. That's a good use of time. That's very efficient.
It's the best way to be efficient.
Lindsay and James, thank you so much for being on Make Games Drink Coffee.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And that's the end of episode 20. Wow, 20 episodes already. How time flies, right? Thank you for listening to Make Games Drink Coffee. You can find out more at makegamesdrinkcoffee.com, and you can email me at makegamesdrinkcoffee@gmail.com. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, leave a review, and tip your barista. Drink up. I'll see you next time.